Welcome to another episode of Unrehearsed Research. I'm excited to have James Tanner back with me today. Welcome, James.
Heidi, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. All right, today, James, I wanted to look at some descendancy research. So I've been in separate videos doing some DNA research, and as part of that, we're looking at the Hugh Willson line, and I want to see which descendants of his might be my cousins, and so therefore I need to have a really strong, either they have to have a strong tree, or I need to build out my own version of their tree to connect in with my tree. So I wondered today, James, if we could look at my family search tree as the descendancy view of Hugh Willson and build that out as well as we can. And I will manually transfer over any additional ancestors that I find over time to ancestry trees where the DNA happens. But I family search is my main tree, so I wanted to look at the descendancy view there. All right, so here I am on my tree. Let me go to Hugh Willson and show his tree, and then we'll switch to the descendancy view. And yeah, okay, this is the right one. And I've got 4 generations showing. So yeah, James, what are steps you would take to just look at a tree like this and say the families look complete, we found all the children, etc.
Okay, so the first thing I do is in a sense, synchronize the file with Ancestry. I look at my relationship to Hugh Willson, and then I make sure as I go back on Ancestry that I have that connection back and down to wherever I need to be to this person. If he's a direct line ancestor, obviously it's just click back to him. Because I don't have my entire tree on Ancestry, so I create the tree as I actually go through the process. When I do this, then my first evaluation is to look at the information that's in the family search family tree. This doesn't mean there isn't more information out there. It generally indicates the degree of involvement there has been generally in the past with this particular line. And it's pretty easy to determine that because if you look down and you're down, it doesn't really matter between 3 and 4 generations. First of all, you'll see over on the right-hand side, you'll see some, as you've scrolled down, you see a lot of blue icons. The blue
Hmm.
icons indicate that there are potential record matches for these people. What that means is it means 2 things. One is the fact that these record matches are there indicates that no one's been into these people recent enough to take advantage of them or do any work on them. But as we go back to the list of people, going up to, once again, to Hugh Willson, what we see in the first steps down, for instance, if you go down that first level, however, down to where it says Charles Miller and
Hmm.
Stella Reynolds, you'll see it says 1884. On the next one, it's not completely identified. 1884 deceased. And then you drop down and there's some more 80 deceased individuals. Whenever there's an indication that a person was born in like 1894, for example, and then it shows deceased, it's very possible that person got married, that
Hmm.
lived long enough to get married, had and could have had children. Now, 1894, it's a kind of near the present, and my rule of thumb on how I'm doing the work is I use what's called the 110-year rule in family search. It's a pretty good indicator that you're going to get into live people. It works me out of what I call genealogy to go try to find live people, and that
Yeah.
becomes very much more difficult as you get closer to the present. So uh, I really kind of end that process here, but in the 1894 it does give me some time for these people to get old and get married. And if you keep going down, you'll see the same kinds of things from time to time going down. The fact that there's a lot of marriages, the marriages are indicated by those arrows, little
So
arrows
those kind
there.
of
When
things.
if you
Yeah.
click on just click on one randomly, you'll see that there's another set of children which do go into well into the 1900s. So those are, there's indication that there's been considerable amount of work done on some of these lines. From the standpoint, and this is just going to be an opinion, but from the standpoint of my working with this, I would be focusing just sort of, first of all, looking at some of the ones that say 1919, for instance, Harold L. Eagle. That's a little early, that's a little late for me. I would go back up to one of those others that has a deceased. Let's say Hazel Miller down there, or Arthur Miller.
Just open them in a new tab.
Let's actually open them up and see what we have here. We have one source. If you look at and that's just a 1900 census source, which would be when they were 6 years old. So that doesn't tell us much. And then if you go down, you'll see that there's just nothing here. First of all, the marriage for Charles H. Miller, the father there, is not standardized. All of those kinds of things are evidence that very little work's been done on this for a while. And one thing you can do is look over on the right-hand side and see latest changes and see what's happened there. See, now we've got the last changes on these lines were back in 2015. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, and there's very few of them too, it looks like.
So those are all indications that spending time on this particular descendancy would be a very interesting, because you're going to run into a lot of living people, and the possibilities of some of them having taken a DNA test with Ancestry would be much greater. Obviously, dead people can't take the test. And so what we're looking for here is information about whether or not actually doing the work on Ancestry would have been productive.
Is it helpful to go look at Ancestry trees and see if there's, if Hazel is the grandmother or great grandmother to someone who happens to be an Ancestry user, and they've built out the tree on Ancestry, but it hasn't been transferred over to Family Search? Is it worth checking both places
Oh, no, absolutely. So
Yeah,
the next step, the next outcome in the process, of course, is what I mentioned a moment ago, and that is I simultaneously open up Ancestry, find Hugh Willson in 1798. Okay, so basically, Hugh Willson is close to the end of your line in Ancestry. But if you click on Hugh Willson, you'll see something that's interesting. And that is, right now, he has 7 additional hints to what he's already have. And you'll see there your other Ancestry member trees. And if you're interested in looking at the DNA connection, then you're going to want to find out what they've got. And this is one with 13 sources for this guy. And you can look at these trees, what kinds of work's been done. But it looks to me like there's substantial trees, and here's spouses and children.
And you're calling them substantial trees because you're noticing right away that they each have 11 sources, 10 sources,
right?
13. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's just a name, for example, and there's 0 sources, then that means the person hasn't done, that person on Ancestry, the user from Ancestry, has not done any research at all. I mean, they just haven't done anything. The problem you're going to be is, of course, there's not a tremendous, but a substantial, be a better term, a substantial amount of difference in the, let's call it completeness or usability of trees on Ancestry. Some of them are not worth looking at, and some are highly sourced and have lots of real good information.
Yeah, and I guess you could run into the issue too that, there's 3 public member trees for Hugh, but if I start going down into each of his children, Leonard, Charlotte, Catherine, there could be far more public member trees with those people in them if the Ancestry users haven't gotten back as far as Hugh. So I'd have to potentially be looking at lots of public member trees if I want to be thorough about using that, the previous work that's been done.
Yeah, and another quick way to determine this is you have the name of that person, the owner of the person of the
Oh,
tree.
right. Yeah.
And so that's a real quick check. You can basically go over to your list of DNA and see if Pearson is a surname that shows up in
Great
your
point.
DNA list,
Yeah, that's right.
because
That's
that'll
great.
that'll give you an idea. I mean, from this, you are obviously, well, now let's call it obviously, but you're allegedly related to this person because you both have identified this ancestor as being a part of your family tree. So this
Yeah.
person is your cousin, this person who is
Yeah,
the
that's right. We
family
just don't
tree.
know how yet.
The issue is whether he's in this case he, or the next one she, has taken the DNA test with Ancestry and shows up on your DNA, your list of DNA matches.
Hey, if any of this video has been helpful, please consider liking it, leaving a comment, or subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it.
But using this information is important because one thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the list of sources that you have here on Ancestry for this person. And in my case, this is kind of my attitude, and I don't encourage other people to do this. I just say this is how I do it, because why, I don't know, because maybe that's because I feel it's more productive and I am more source based. Uh, the fact that I have these sources, that there are 13 sources here, I already have, or you I already have 7 sources here on your ancestry tree.
Mhm.
And if you look down at the hints, let's look at the hints. We have, and I'm not looking individually, we're seeing there's some that may or may not be. These are all from Canada. So do we know if this guy lived in Canada?
He did,
Is
yeah. So some of
okay.
these look like potential matches right off the bat, some don't.
I don't consider the ancestry member trees to be sources because they're user created and the information is user entered. Their sources may be helpful to me, but the answer to that question is going to be really simple. Ancestry will find automatically has 7 because apparently they're matching up the sources from these other family trees and your sources, and they're coming up with a total that is probably greater than what you have right now. So what I do is focus on the hints, and I sort of discount the family trees. Now, why would I use the family tree? I would come back to the family tree because I would be looking for something that I'm not seeing or not having, not doesn't make sense to me. Because see, as I've noticed, just as we've looked at this, someone else has 2 wives get listed for this person.
Which is what I have too for him on Family Search.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
that's the additional information that you need to transfer over to families, to Ancestry. And if there are actually sources for those, by working through the record hints, it should add that additional information, the 2 marriages and everything.
Okay,
And,
good.
and if it doesn't do that, then you can go to the Ancestry member trees and see if they have any actual sources that support the fact that this person had two spouses.
Okay. So you're using the formal hints here that are green, but you're also using the other Ancestry public member trees as hints or aggregations of hints that I'm not going to take the details at face value, but they might have sources that I don't have that aren't coming up in my hints.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so what you've pooled, the process by doing the 2 programs side by side. In other words, so you have Family Search open
Hmm.
and you have Ancestry open on your split screen or 2 monitors, depending on whether you're involved in this. Coming to this point, this is where we do the work. In other words, we're going to start looking at the sources. We're going to start building the tree. Uh, from my methodology of handling this, and I do this on a systematic way. So I take an ancestor like Hugh Willson, a remote ancestor who lived. My preference is to start with somebody in the mid to late 1700s. Now, why is that the case? Because he was born in 1798 and died in 1886. He would be in the 1850, 1860, 1870, and
Yeah.
1880 censuses. Sarah Ann, if she was born in 1806 in Canada, would be in the Canadian censuses. So, and died in 1874 because they both overlap, their life terms overlap the census records.
Hmm.
Why that's important is that, of course, because their census records are available, and secondly, because they usually help give you continuity in the family, and you can identify families when they have common names because of the pattern of the names of all the children and things like
Hmm.
that. So and so that makes this whole process much easier. Otherwise, if I started the next generation back or two into the early 1700s, then I may be ending up spending an inordinately large amount of time simply trying to reconstruct a family in the early 1700s, which is a different challenge, but um, from the standpoint of, of doing DNA, for example, it would be not worth anything. I mean, as far as advancing any kind of connections there, because it just doesn't, you're not going to get any further information from doing research in a family that starts in the 17 and dies in the 1700s, because unless you're able to break through that early group of people and find their descendants in any kind of order, you have a much longer task to go through,
Good. Okay.
particularly if, for instance, expand this back one more generation. There's a little expand.
All right.
Just look at it. So you have Hugh Willson going back and William Wilson, but if you just look at Hugh Willson for the 1744 Hugh Wilson, then see you've got two sources, and you've got how many children? Let's look. You've got three children. Let's see what the children have in sources.
Okay. Let's see. We'll go here, here, here.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah. 24, 4, 0.
yeah. See,
Hmm.
so I guess this is just a preference of someone who has reached the age where they don't want to spend a bunch of time doing research that isn't productive.
Yeah.
So here's the illustration here. So for example, now we looked at that Arthur Miller down there that
Hmm.
says he was born in 1897, and click on that and let's see him and what he's doing. See, here's one source. So chances are that he was married, and if we looked in the 1910, 1920, 1930 censuses, or if we simply look at him on Ancestry, we may find a record hint. General rule is that it's easier to find somebody in 1850 than it is to find them in 1950.
Yeah.
But we do have now we do have the 1950 census, so I have to kind of revise that a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we wrap up, then let me summarize a few things you've said about doing descendancy research and then just tell me if I missed anything. But if I'm looking at a descendancy view like this and I'm wanting to make sure the family's complete, I might check for these blue research hints on the right. I might also check for any of the lifespans that say deceased, meaning that the death date hasn't been found, and so it may be missing important events. I may also look for the absence of this little arrow, which might, the arrow indicates a spouse. And so if you click the arrow to open the spouse, you'd see it. But if there's the absence of the arrow, then John Wilson might have been married and we haven't found the marriage record yet. And yeah, anything else I missed?
Yeah, well, the things you've mentioned, yes. The other ones are like the one you just opened. You have a family that is in 1853, um, and the child was born in 1875. Very unusual to have only one child in that kind of marriage situation.
Okay, great point.
You're almost always going to have more children, so there's more people in that family. So anything you look when you're looking at this descendancy view, of what jumps out after you understand the principles here, that if you find a person that has a death date and no death date and no spouse, then that's an open advertisement that there's more information available. And then the second part of that is if you find a couple who are married but have no children, then that's another sign on the
Mhm.
roadway that says that there's more information that needs to be gathered. And if there are only a very few children, that's another sign. So there's, all of those add up to looking at opportunities and on this kind of a line. And basically, what you may find, and this is not uncommon, is that when you start doing the research and you start matching them up to Ancestry, you're going to find out that somebody before you did every single person they could find, and
Hmm.
you haven't, and you're not going to find anybody else. But if you're looking for, as you indicated earlier, DNA matches, and you're looking for people to gather more DNA information, then you are, this is still valuable. It's still a way to get to that information.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, James, thanks so much for coming on today. I appreciate your thoughts, and it was great to get together again, and we'll see where this research goes.